So, I mean, just to quote you on page 40, I'll just give you the quote because I think it's just so, and it'll allow us um, to move on with the emigration because it's so important, I believe. You say, the overzealous policing of dancing in Ireland had a major consequence. It stunted the growth of the domestic music industry, and it meant that Ireland was dependent on overseas record companies. For decades, many of the best of Ireland's music entrepreneurs reacted to the heavy-handed policing of dancing. They emigrated. And in this regard, I think the next chapter, the global music industries in Ireland, you give us some insight. I think Jim gives us some insight and some more important statistics. It's full of really telling statistics. And maybe I would like you to develop the idea that I think throughout the whole chapter you develop as Ireland being the most globalized country in the world and therefore acting as a comptoir, a counter. So I think that it's very key to understanding the role of the diaspora and the limitations of what happened in Ireland as a result.
Yeah, I think Jim's chapter is a really strong piece of work. I think it's a great achievement because it not only shows how the global music industry functions and grows and develops through mergers and acquisitions, where power is concentrated in an ever smaller group of people. And for a small country like Ireland, which has a very, very complicated, Ireland has a really complex relationship with the global music industry because we've done incredibly well. You mentioned U2, but one of the biggest rock bands in terms of sales of the last 60, 80 years. There's a band that emerged in my lifetime. And unlike pretty much all of their contemporaries, they kept a sales plateau globally when, the other bands that maybe started out or with around that time or had something similar, like the Teardrop Explodes or Echo and the Bunnymen or the Mighty Bois, like bands that were written about in the same magazines by the same writers. U2 are the most extraordinary success story. And clearly all of the other bands that anyone has heard of globally have generally benefited from the fact that the major labels are very good at taking certain acts and exposing them to a global audience. But this idea of a comptoir, this idea of Ireland being almost a pond with a really rich ecosystem, and occasionally a major label will see a little fish in there, and will make it a global success. Now, there are problems with that economically. One, major label, when they sign you for life. In fact, for your afterlife as well. So generally the ownership of your masters, of your actual recordings, of your publishing, if you've signed a publishing deal, that goes out of Ireland. And, we've had Irish book publishers. Look at the great Irish films. Now, a lot of them have received funding from abroad, but they're still Irish, whereas we haven't produced enough. Now, do we have Irish record labels? Yes, we do. Do we have Irish record labels produced fantastic music? Yes, they have. From Ellen O'Byrne to Terry Hooley and Good Vibrations to the Chieftains and Clatter Records, to Any Other City, to the new hip hop labels, the new punk labels. But we don't have a huge export from any of those labels over a 40-year period. That means that we've always been dependent on foreign expertise, foreign capital, which generally has assumed ownership rights, and we've then lost a huge portion of the income. Now, there's no easy solution to that. although I would certainly advocate we need more DIY. We need to encourage more DIY. We need to encourage more people to think, yeah, we can set up a record label. We can put on gigs. We can form a collective. So we could set up a publishing company. So I genuinely think that Ireland has a double disadvantage. One is that we don't have domestic labels that compete. And two is that we don't develop DIY enough. And that idea of a comptoir that we're just an outpost, that we're seen by the major labels in the same way that Newcastle is, except we've a bit of a branding halo where, if something's Ireland, you can say, oh, it's the next U2, or this will appeal to you because you like Enya, or you like, Guinness or Shamrocks, like sometimes the Irish abroad have been marketed in that way. But I really think I would urge anyone who's in a band, who's a DJ, to read Jim's chapter very, very carefully, because it has very, very big implications for the Irish.
And it's not like, just want to add about this chapter, it's not like Ireland has not implemented any kind of infrastructural methods for harnessing and developing local talent, because I think you might want to talk to us a little bit more about the Section 2 of the 1969 Finance Act, and maybe the development of radio stations in Ireland as well, which did promote. But is that strong enough to fight the market forces? That's what it comes down to.
Well, here's one way of looking at it. If you can turn on an Irish radio station and you're really passionate about Irish music, the question for you is, do you think there's enough Irish music on there? And if you feel there isn't, then there's a further series of questions to be asked. Radio stations, their job is to play music to make a profit. They're generally owned by companies, and their legal responsibility are to the shareholders. So it's literally not their job to promote Irish music, and they don't do it. Why would they? They cannot afford to put on a record that jars their listener out of, oh, it's great to hear that Rihanna song again. Oh, Taylor Swift, brilliant to hear her. Wonder what they're going to play next. And if they suddenly play Paranoid Visions, a lot of people will switch.
Yeah.
So the radio stations are a subset of the music industry. And the music industry is actually the music industries. It's the recording industry, the studio industry, the radio industry, and how they all function together to advance Irish music. That's very, very tricky. And to be honest, just now, even the socialist governments haven't got it right. You can't force people to make pop music that sells, and you can't force entrepreneurs to take an interest in music, which sometimes has a very, very lengthy payoff before you actually turn a profit. Yeah. But we have done some very, very notable things and we do lots of things, Ireland on state level, to encourage music. And the question for people sitting in Ireland or anywhere else, if they're interested in Irish music, is enough been done? Because that'll vary for everyone. And I'm not the sort of person who would tell people how they should approach, what they listen to. Because there's, music is freedom. But there's a longer consideration. If we stop producing bands of the stature of U2, artists of the commercial stature of Enya, and, both commercially and artistic, there's a huge, huge loss to our cultural life, to our economy, to all of the spillover things that happen. If U2 are the biggest band in the world, how many people in Ireland get jobs, as their crew, as their publicists, as their wardrobe people? There's a huge, often uncounted economic benefit to very, very successful artists, and there's no easy solution,
And
but
it's
it's something that
also, yeah,
yes,
I think it's a bit frustrating too for Irish people, Irish punters, when their band go abroad. Then you never see them again because they're busy touring America and the UK, and it's very difficult to see them in Ireland. They only play one gig if you're lucky a year, and and then you have to travel if you want to see them. So that's just a little bit of an aside, but it is frustrating as an Irish, and probably for you too, as somebody who's gone to 5,000 gigs, difficult to see the people you like on your own territory.